Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. This week, we are joined by a guest who is an author and has quite the story to share with us. And I'm excited to get into it. Our guest today is Karen N. Coccioni. Welcome to Poddin My Noggin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been so excited to be on your show. So I feel honored. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So Karen, do you go by Karen N or Karen?
Just Karen. It's fine.
Just Karen. Okay. So Karen, you've had quite a life. From what I've read, you've been successful in the publishing industry with 8 books out, and you've done a lot of things. One of the pieces, and we're going to talk about this later, but one of the pieces I loved how you started out was the first line of my memoir. I came into life stuttering, and the last line is, I'd never be silenced again. And I found that very profound. And so I want to get into the early years of Karen and what that looked like. And let's start there if you feel comfortable with that.
Oh my goodness. No, yes, I do. I mean, I feel like my mission in this life is to share the story. I mean, the only way I can reconcile what happened to me was to tell myself there was a reason, right? And the reason is to share it and to help others. I will say that I didn't even realize that I made that full circle with the book, with the first line and the last line, until my editor called me up crying, literally crying out of joy from the book. And she said, oh my goodness, do you realize like what you did here? And I hadn't. But basically that's what it is. So I did have a really severe stutter, speech impediment when I was 4 years old.
Okay.
And it really did, it did a couple of things for me. First of all, I was secluded, right? Because kids didn't want to play with me. Adults would get annoyed with me. They wouldn't understand it. I had the hardest time trying to push the words out. And it just became so frustrating. And of course, it even becomes more frustrating, right, when that happens. What that did, though, it made me learn to write very early in life. And it taught me to, okay, I can't speak the words I want to say, but oh my goodness, when I first learned how to write words, it was like, it was just like a new world for me, right? So I was able to write messages, and I don't know if I have this in my bio, but I came from an Italian background, and my nonna and my mother and the women would be in the kitchen cooking, and I would be writing on the insides of my mother's cookbooks. My mother had a beautiful collection of cookbooks. I wouldn't write on the recipes. I knew that they were important to her. I still have those books, and being 74 years old, they're old. They're almost 3/4 of a century. But that's how. So it was the two things. I had to learn how to explore words. So when we speak, the intonation where we put our you ask a question, your voice is going to raise, you have an exclamation, right? You can't do that. So it even made me not only knew that words, I could write a message, it also forced me to explore language to such detail, right? That I had to get the correct word. I had to get the right word that was going to be able to say what I wanted to say. So it was a combination of learning that, and then being kind of sequestered by myself and not having the friends that I knew that, I knew from then that the writing was going to be my life. There was just no getting around it.
It's interesting to me too, because you just said like you had to have the right word. And what a lesson that is. I mean, maybe not so much a lesson that you need to learn as a child, but a lesson as adults that we should always be looking for the right word and be very intentional with what we say.
Right.
Adding the intonation, the affliction, the whole sort of thing, always intentional. And like when you were telling me about, stuttering and trying to force and push those words out, like I'm imagining that to be in of itself very traumatic and very confusing, because I would imagine if you just told me you were 74 years old, and I had to try very hard to not do the shock face because I did not anticipate that. But so 74 years old with a stutter, like, oh my gosh, that particular time in life as well would have been very difficult for someone, even more so than when, say, I was 4 years old, right? And trying to fit a square in a round hole type thing.
Mhm.
So just, yeah, I can only imagine
Well,
just the
there
pressure.
was the added that I lived in a multi-generational family. So my mother came from Italy when she was like in her late teens. She spoke English fluently, actually, because she went to a convent school in Italy. They got thrown out when Mussolini came. They lost all their vineyards. They lost all their money. They just came with nothing. Um, and my dad was born born here, but his father, his people came from Italy as well. And the thing is that we didn't have a whole lot of money, and we lived in what we called, you probably don't know this either, but for your listeners, there's something called railroad rooms. And I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, which was right outside the Lincoln Tunnel. It was, you had warehouses, you had smokestacks, you had, multi multicultural, and that the neighborhood was Italians and Jews and Puerto Ricans and but basically some Cubans. But you walk in the front room and you walk right into a kitchen, and then from the kitchen there's a bathroom, and then there's two bedrooms. We had two bedrooms, and then there's a living room in the back. But in this house there was my father, my mother, my grandmother, my nonna, my aunt who never married, and then my uncle for a time. She had all these people, and you're trying to not only you're trying to compete, so that even when I did start be able to speak, it was, oh, hush up, hush up, hush up, because this is, there's so many people trying to say something.
And Italian people, right? So I shared this with you just now before we started recording, but like I have an Italian uncle by marriage, and I had for several years my own nonna. She like accepted me as her own, even changed some of her recipes because I can't eat dairy or I can't eat red meat. And so like
Oh,
that's a massive thing for a nonna to do of her age.
very.
Yeah, so like, and I've gotten to spend time with Italians, and what I notice is they're so expressive when they speak, and
Yes,
hand gestures, and their volume is much higher than, say, like mine would be in a conversation.
yes.
And I remember the first time I witnessed that was in 1999, the first time I came here to Montreal, and I was standing in the kitchen. I was meeting Nona for the first time, and the family was around Christmas, so there was a lot of family in the room. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, so it really is like it is on TV, And like, I was just enamored with the culture and then the food and all of it. So
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, no, it is. And my mother actually was born in Piemonte, which is in northern Italy, which is a little bit more quieter. But my father was Sicilian, so that is really where it's also where the volatile nature came in, and so. But what really then really changed my experience and just really changed the whole the whole map of where my life was going to go was my father came from a family that was very abusive. His father, my grandfather, would sit at the dinner table with a belt across his lap. And if a child spoke at all, they'd get the belt. And my father was the black sheep, but they called him the family out of six. So he came from that kind of family. And then he married my mom, and having all these other people in the house. And I really, in retrospect, I understand how he probably felt kind of left out, right? He had all women around him, and he really felt left out. But we moved from this apartment when I was 5 years old, actually, into a home. He did well in his business. He manufactured Italian specialties, and we'd lived in this big, big colonial home. And he became very abusive with me, molesting. He started molesting me at 5 years old. I had a very traumatic experience with him when I was 7 years old, and it was, if you go out of line, this is what's going to happen to you, right? You're going to feel it one way or another, right? So it just, for anyone who's had any kind of that abuse, especially when they're young, and for me, it hardwired my brain.
Of
That
course.
and that's how the only way I can explain it is that I didn't think for myself anymore. I didn't think for me. It was, what do I need to do to not let this keep on happening? Right. So
Survival, right?
yes, yeah, it really was survival. And he was also, he didn't, I have an older sister. She's passed now, but she was very sickly as a child. She was also pretty. She was pretty. She was sickly. She was a genius. I don't say that lightly. She just really had these off the charts how smart she was. And so it was. I don't know if he wanted to, I don't know, take out his angst out on me. Um, I was stubborn. I was here. I had this stutter, and he actually had a stutter when he got angry. So you have all that between the stutter, between the being lonely anyway. I didn't really lose my stutter until I was about 6 years old. And even today, though, if I really I don't get angry often. It's just not me, but the couple of times I have, the stutter will come out. But you take all that, and then what do you do with it? And that's why it's taken me a long time. My journey has been very long, very arduous. It's led me into all kinds of things.
Of course. Like, and to me, it's like it feels obvious that you would experience trauma and go down different paths that maybe weren't the greatest paths in the world and make choices that weren't maybe the greatest choices. That feels so obvious because I think you indicated that he sexually and physically abused you, and there was coercion and fear tactics and all of that stuff. How long did it last? It started at 5 and
The actual molestation lasted for 5 years, and the those days. So we lived in this colonial house, right? And it had like a basement, and then a first, second, third level, and then the attic. To get to the attic, it was very, very narrow, small staircase, and adults wouldn't go up there because it was too hard. They didn't want to, try to navigate the stairs. So I would go up to this little room, and it had a little bed. It looked like a nun cell, and there's actually a cross on the wall. I don't know why, and a fan light window. And I would sit at this window, and I would just like look out at the to me, the planets, the moon, the stars, and all this mystery, and looking out there trying to figure out my life. What is happening to me? Why is this happening? And that's where, again, just to connect with the writing, I have to talk about writing when I talk about this, because the writing was was my sole survivor. I mean, I write on my website, I have a line that words are the soul and breath in me of me, and they really are. It's I feel that at the very core that it's what saved me, because I was able to again write out, the feelings, right? Like, I even feel now talking about it, I can feel my chest get tight just from, talking about it again. So yeah, it was difficult. It was, my father was just, he was, I don't know if he was bipolar, and they never, I don't know what it was, but he was very volatile. He would, um, take a knife to his neck and tell my mother he was going to kill himself. I mean, it was just very, it was all over the place. And my mother was meek and she loved me, but I never felt protected because everyone was afraid of him, right? Because he would threaten to do things, right? So, and then, they'd be afraid of him. So it took a while I only wrote the book. I only wrote out my story, and 5 years ago. It took a long time because, and I waited to really, I couldn't do it until everybody was, I didn't feel comfortable doing it until most everybody was dead. Um, but yeah, it was, and the decisions I made were, I knew I was gay um, when I was in school, in elementary school. But my family was homophobic. They were racist. They were, anytime I asked a question about something, it was, I really was the black sheep of the family. My mind just went in a different direction than society at the time.
Yeah.
Um, so, it led me to 2 marriages with abusive men, right? So because it just, just kept on going.
So I think, like, based on what you said, it's clear that your husband, or your husband, your father, had some undiagnosed mental illness
Oh
growing,
yeah. Yes.
right? And,
Yes.
like, I don't even know if anyone would have labeled a man at that time with mental illness, right? Because
No,
that's
no,
the times we're in.
and they were ashamed of it. As late as my sister was 7 years older than I was. My mom didn't have me until she was 41. It was late. She had a lot of miscarriages. But when my sister had her first child, she got really, really depressed. She married very, very young. She married a man that my father wanted her to marry. He was older. And um, they put her in a psychiatric hospital because she was depressed. It probably was no more than postpartum depression from having, the baby. They moved out to Long Island, New York, but they moved out to when it was not popular back then, so, and she got shock treatments. But she was there for like 6 months, and my mom wouldn't let me go to see her. They separated us. They wouldn't talk about it. Nobody in the family knew what was going on. So yeah, it was like this real cloak of shame around, around it. So you're right. So between my father and so it took me my own years of of healing and recovery and therapy to just kind of put the pieces together and try to understand what really went on as much as I could do. Although I have to say that there's blocks of my memory that I just don't remember. I think I just have blocked certain things out.
And once again, like, that's another thing to me that just feels so natural when you experience that kind of trauma and you're in that kind of environment.
Hmm.
It's part of survival, right? Our
Yes.
brains will do the strangest things to
Yes.
survive. And
Yes.
if that's forgetting certain things and, like, burying them very deep, it will do that. So, when did you leave home? Or did you leave home?
So I, um, I did and I didn't. I was 19 years old. I wanted to go to the a college in Connecticut for creative writing, and of course, writing was something you didn't do in the family. So, my father he wanted me to go to a finishing school in New York City,
Oh,
and I lasted I lasted 6 months, and I did run off into Connecticut, but I was so um, I was not self reliant at all
okay.
because I wasn't allowed to date. I wasn't allowed to go to my prom. I wasn't allowed to do a whole lot of things. My father just kept me very insular. And so what do? You go after the first guy that you find that is gonna, you know, and you construct yourself so that that person's gonna like you.
Yes.
And yeah, so the first time I got married, I was 19. Um, and I did have two sons, uh, who I adore. I've got five grandchildren now. It's all good. But I mean, at the time, it was, he came back from Connecticut because my father said, well, you could work for me. Right. So I was again with not only an abusive husband, an abusive father, it just piled on. I got more depressed. I mean, I was a terrible mom because I was in survival mode, right? I was trying to survive. So I just wasn't there for my kids. I mean, I have a great relationship now. My son, my oldest son told me a few years ago, I don't know, he said, mom, he goes, you're like a lot better mom these days than you were when you were younger. But, and then um, I was so, yeah. So that marriage actually lasted though 19 years. And then he ran off, and what did I do? I married again because during those times, I hadn't gone to school. I hadn't done anything. So I wasn't allowed to leave the house just about. So I married a second person that, you know, the only good thing with, I shouldn't say the only good thing. I shouldn't say that because I'm actually very good friends with my ex-husband now. He didn't realize how abusive he was. And with him, it was just a lot more emotional abuse, among other things, but mostly that. But I was able to go to school, um, yeah, and get my degrees, and he supported me through a lot of things. I got to be so depressed and so bad that I actually, when I was in 1994, I actually wrote a suicide note to someone, a social worker that I knew, and before I knew it, I was committed into a mental clinic because I was 99 pounds at the time. I was 5'7", and I tried to kill myself twice. But so that was another year out of, out of my life, that. So it was, yeah. It's been, well, the time in the mental clinic is probably the hardest. It's the bravest thing I've ever done in my life, the most frightening, and the hardest thing I ever did in my life. And I just want to just say one thing about people with eating disorders. I mean, it is still the second biggest killer of women and men, between the ages of 12 and 25. But out of my ward, I truly believe in my heart. I know two people died, but out of 8 people, I'm the only one who survived. I'm the only one who had whatever was in me that made me, this is not going to kill me.
I think that's like breaking free or finding your light or something like that. How long did you spend in there?
So actually, asked my ex-husband the other day because I called him up. He lives out of state, and I called him up and I said, "How long was I there?" They said March 8th, 1994 to March 10th, 1995. The thing is, when you talk about wanting to survive and wanting to do things. So my ex-husband worked for a large construction company, and we actually, as soon as we got married, when I was 40 years old, we moved to Hong Kong, which again was very isolating for me, right? That's what made everything go sour. But I did go to, back then, Hong Kong was under the British auspices. So I actually got a stellar education. I mean, my professors were from Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard here from the United States. I mean, it was a great education. But so I wrote this note to the social worker in a clinic and in the States. And he put me on a plane and we got there. And I was 4 months inpatient. And then the rest of the time, I was 6 months, almost 7 months, and as an outpatient living there in a small apartment.
Wow.
So, and then, and right when I left, and then I know I lost my train of thought for a second. When I was in Hong Kong, they gave me, we talked to the people at the Hong Kong University, and my ex-husband told him that, she's sick, she's got to go to the States. And they said, well, you have 1 year. I was in my very last year of getting my bachelor's degree, and they said, you have 1 year to come back and a date. And you have to, if don't pass your exams, you're going to lose everything, right? So I literally, after being a year in the mental clinic, in and out, I came back to University of Hong Kong, and 2 weeks later, I took my exams. I took my exams, and I passed. Not the marks. I went from a 4.0 down quite a bit, but I did pass. We made arrangements that people I knew had a very good friend there, and she just kept on sending me all the. She would record on a little recorder, back, right, and then record, and that's how I managed to finish my degrees.
Wow. And the mental institution was focused on both like the emotional and physical component of like your eating disorder and
Yeah,
like
so it's actually a groundbreaking. It actually was a groundbreaking clinic. It was the highest clinic in the United States at the time for addictions. And your eating disorder is usually always symptomatic of something greater that happened to you. All the people, right, they either had, abusive families, or there was something going on that happened to them, right, to make them want to kill themselves, because that's what it is, right? I mean, my goal was to be under 100 pounds. And I felt, every time I lost a pound, it makes you feel good because you could control your body, right? And why I'm not saying the name of the clinic is because then they didn't know back then, but they didn't believe what happened to me. And the reason why I'm on your show today and why I want to spread my message so badly is because so often, even today, even in today's world, women have to prove that this happened to them. And that shouldn't be.
I
That
agree.
should not be. I literally had a flashback in the psychiatrist's office. They had to restrain me because I was so wild with this flashback of, my father again, and didn't happen. And then I wasn't gay. That you can't be gay. You're just going through this. You're not gay. And I said, no, I am gay. So it forced me. The only way I was able to get out eventually was to lie. All right, I'm not gay. Yeah, you're right. It didn't happen to me. Oh, that's no way to heal. It's no way to recover. So as much as they saved my life, but uh, it's the mental health system is, it was sad. It was really sad because this was a renowned clinic. And I was fortunate that my ex-husband had the money to be able to pay for it, because back then it was very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Insurance only covered 30 days. And after that, it was, he had to pay for it. But it's sad that that it wasn't. And again, why I had to tell my story, you know, I mean, like, I got people in my life and they say, why do you have to like tell your story to everybody? What, you know, it's a bad mark on our family. But there's a reason why I'm telling it, right?
Of course.
It's for me, because everyone told me don't say it. So no, I want to say it. And then it's for everybody else who may have a similar story that no one's listening to them. That to me was that to me was why it took, I think it just took so many more years to, you know, to really uh, be okay with it and be happy.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break and we'll be back in just a moment.
Life in Stitches by CK Sims. Available for purchase in paperback and ebook on all major platforms. Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
And we're back. We are joined today, if you're just joining us, with Karen and Coccioli. And she was explaining to us before the break some severe trauma that she has experienced in her life. You said so many things too that just sort of like fired off neurons in my own head, right? So like you said, this happened in 1994. Well, I too, in 1994, went to a psychiatrist because I was gay, because my parents are ministers, and it was this big thing. And, you know, he told me that it's not gay if you don't act on it. Or, or if it's not a sin if you don't act on it. And I held so much hatred for that man for so long until I found out, because I myself went in and explored mental health and all of those things, until I found out that he was just doing his job in that period. Interestingly enough, in the DSM-3 that they would have been operating off of, homosexuality was still considered a mental illness. And I
Right.
didn't know that as a teenage boy at that time.
Right.
Like for me, I just felt that he was like, "Oh yeah, just deny this entire person."
Right.
He wasn't helping me cope with the fact that I had these feelings. It was like, just don't act on it, don't think about it. I'm like, that's all I think about is boys. Like, come on, you know. Back then, just to be clear to everyone listening, now it's men. But to go through when you said the part about to get out, you had to lie. Like I felt that, right? Like that kind of resonates with me because I felt like I feel like I know what you had to do to survive in that moment. But then I think that you've had to lie most of your beginning part of your life to people around you and even maybe to yourself to just survive and to get through it to come out the other end.
I never lied to myself.
Never, okay.
I always knew, like, I knew I was gay when I was married to my first husband. I really lived two lives. I would be the New Jersey person, and then I would go over to New York City, and I would go to the queer bars and the lesbian bookstores, and I couldn't really act out. I would lie there, right? I would tell them, oh, I'm not married. I don't have two kids at home. It really was, but I just had to. I had to stay in touch with myself. I was so afraid if I didn't do that, that I would lose myself, because it came to a point where all I was doing was being a constructed person. I didn't, for the man I was with at the time, the way I wore my hair. You could see. Now I wear my hair. Shave my hair. I've been shaving it now for 15 years, and I consider myself androgynous, queer. So, there's a part of me. Some days I like to look more masculine than I do feminine. I don't ever really look feminine, but I never did lie to myself, but I don't know. It was almost, I was just so afraid to let that go. I was afraid I would really lose myself, because sometimes the only way that I could not kill myself was to say, okay, you've got this in you. Just hang on. Just hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. And that's kind of,
That's a
that's,
lot, though.
that, yeah.
Like the constant reminder or constant trying to just stay present. You spent that year, 1995, you got out, you got your bachelor's degree from Hong Kong University. How did life begin to shift for you after that?
Well, so we actually lived there for 9 years. So I got my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got my doctorate in comparative literature. They didn't have like a doctorate in identity, sexual identity, or anything, but that was my focus was. And so I, I wanted, the more I was trying to understand myself, I could do that through academic studies.
Mm.
So so I was able to, dissect people that I felt that I had an alignment with, like Virginia Woolf, for instance, who actually did commit suicide, but, you know, was probably a closeted gay woman, and Oscar Wilde, and got sent to jail. And so I would look up and I would study these people, and that was my way of learning more about myself, keeping myself, trying to ground something in me that was myself. So my doctorate, it was great. It really changed me in that, because my mind is very analytical. It's like, even with trying to cure myself from the not cure myself, but from the eating disorder, if you could tell me something that is very logical and makes sense, and they say, well, the more you starve yourself, you actually, lose muscle, and this, like that. I can get that. I can get a hold of that, and I could, kind of understand that. So life didn't change really in that I was still married.
Okay.
So Hong Kong, I lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 years, because that's where my ex-husband went to there. So I actually studied there. But again, I did writing. I just studied, on my own. I actually didn't get, I finally got divorced in 2014, because I was in another long marriage. Because and people say to me, and they'd be, like, well, why? Why'd you stay? How could you stay? Well, it's all you know. It's all you know. Now, I wasn't, brave enough, smart enough. Who knows? Who knows? But um, it was when I felt I could do it, I did it. That's the best I could do. But I had a lot of. It wasn't only in the mental clinic where the mental health professionals told me. At one point they wanted to send me to a conversion camp, and it was even other states that I lived in, that they didn't approve of it. They didn't approve of divorce. They didn't approve, and I would say to them, I'm lying to my husband. I'm not being fair to him. You know, no, 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 that's, no. And like I say, it's a sin. It's a sin, so, and then having, of course, no support, like, from the family. When I finally came out to my sons, they said, yeah, what else is new, Mom? I mean, like they knew, they totally accepted. They're very, hopefully, parented them as best I could to be open, and I was never, the mom with the heels and the lipstick so they knew, they knew I was kind of different.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Like, if you look, I don't know if anybody has the right to ask you why you stayed in your marriage until 2014.
Wait, why what?
Why you stayed in your marriage until 2014.
Oh, I hear
I,
that. I know.
I get it because people are so curious and they want to like understand the why of everything. But I don't know if there could ever be a concrete why. Maybe there's not a concrete why for you. Like, I would imagine perhaps that it was convenient in a way, comfortable, maybe safe in some ways, you know? Um, and depending on how you were living your life in your exchange with your ex husband, like maybe that when you, like you said, when you felt ready and you had what you needed, you left the relationship, right?
Yeah. It still took me, yeah, it still took me some years. I guess the destructive part of what happened by staying in that second marriage, though, was that I became such a construction of myself that I actually even changed my name. So he liked calling me Anne, and Anne is my middle name. And it was, so I literally changed it to Anne Karen. I mean, that's how, I was a robotic from what my father did years ago, right? Because
Of
those
course.
things just they don't go away until you, finally put the little pieces together, and until, for me, it was until being Anne Karen felt so uncomfortable, and, being with him. And then he got worse. He got actually more abusive the longer we were married. So, but yeah, it took a long time. And like I said, you know, part of me, again, telling my story is so people don't wait as long as I did. That they're able to find someone to support them, that they come out, um, sooner. But people today, close people or strangers, like, why do you have to shave your head? It's like not the most becoming look on you, and it's like,
Well, and that's a whole nother topic, right? Because
yes,
I feel like in 2014, you made the choice that, like, I believe we have you mentioned this earlier, I think at the beginning of the podcast, is that you felt that you had purpose, right? And that's what kept you here and to tell your story. And like I feel like, and this might sound like complete batshit crazy, but I feel like if you have a purpose in life and you're not living that purpose or anything close to it, I feel like there's going to be like a constant sort of vibrational di- like disalignment in your energy, and then eventually like it's going to be like, if I don't do this, I'm going to burst, and
yeah,
I gotta break free. I have to chase my dream, or I have to follow, I have to be more authentic to myself. So it feels like to me that time was in 2014 for you, when it was like, no more am I living for someone else, I
yeah.
will live for myself.
So two things happened, actually. One thing was, and this goes back to actually to when I was in my 30s, though, and when I was going to New York City and living my double life. And I, I, I was so sick of hearing the negative banter. I was so sick of hearing my family told me that I dressed wrong and I dressed too masculine, and why can't you do this, and why can't you do this, and, and on and on and on. One day, I literally lost all the hearing in my right ear. It was something called the sudden deafness. And what happens is a viral infection hit my inner ear. And if you have it diagnosed within 48 hours, they could give you like an antidote, and it could kill the virus. But when I went to the emergency room, it literally happened. Literally, I was on the phone, and literally all of a sudden I couldn't hear. I thought the phone went dead. and they thought I maybe had a brain tumor instead of sending me to the ear doctor, right? So I truly believe, and I believe in you manifest your own destiny. I'm a big believer of that. It's what's really another thing that really saved me when I started realizing that. I really believe I lost my hearing because it was okay. The universe is telling you that, you don't want to hear. Good, you're not going to hear it. But when my sister passed, and I went, even though we didn't have a good relationship, she got colon cancer, and I moved to New York, and I stayed with her and helped her with her family. And the last night before she died, she said that she was filled with regret of not having lived the life that she really wanted to live, because she had her own aspirations, and she, was a great mom. My niece and nephews are awesome. She had a wonderful life. I thought, everyone thought, except that the things that she told me in private. And when she died, it was when I shaved my head and I said, "That's it. That's it. I'm not going to be on my deathbed and saying that I didn't live my life." So that was a big, big turning point for me. Really, it's really what made me say, I don't care what my kids say. I don't care what anyone says about who I am or what I do or what I write. Um, I have to be my authentic self from now on in,
So
so
how's it been the
what?
last? So how has it been the last 15 years being authentic to
It's
you?
it's it's still it's been good. It's been good, and I still get the uphill battles. Like I write under my name, and the my book Paradise, and I write under like a little bit more under my name, but then I also have my alter ego Annie Moon, and I write gay erotica. Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So and that's where I have fun, and I let my Mad Hatter come out, and I love writing that because it gives me a good balance. And people don't like that I write that. Well, it is what it is. It's what it is. I'm truly. I have to say that it's never too late, right? And that's what I would tell people. Yes, did I not want to wait until I was until my late 50s, to come into my own and to, do what I want to do and write what I want to write and be who I am. Um, but I do believe that every single step along the way in that journey, no matter how difficult, was the lessons that I've learned, right? And what I've done to not only survive, but to really triumph, right? Because I am. I mean, I I have a wonderful life. I have a wonderful life. I'm so how can I say it wasn't worth it? If I could help people, if I could do something with what happened to me and help people, then it was worth it. It was all worth it.
I love that. It's I think that's such a hard pill for people to swallow, maybe, that your experience as a child and that level of abuse was worth it because you can help people. Like I think that that's something hard for people to process. But I think where it's commendable, and I don't even like to use that word actually, because there's people out there who maybe haven't been able to turn that trauma into a life of authenticity and living for yourself. So, but I think it's powerful.
And empowering, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because I didn't say like it was worth it. Did I not want to have that happen? Of course not. I suffered. I suffered a lot in my life for it, and it took me many years not to be angry at my father, at my family, at this one, that one. And one of the big things for me was learning every single morning now, and I've done this for years. I get up and every single morning I open up my eyes and I say, I, Karen Ann Coccioli, commit to taking 100% responsibility for my life. for every decision I make, for everything. I still say that every single morning, and I've done it for years, because you it you can't blame other people for what happens. You have to do it. But it is very. I mean, it was, again. It was. I just had to say that it was worth it, because it's the only way that I could survive. Because for me, it was, okay, why'd this happen to me? And, well, it happened so you could, and it's not maybe for everybody, but it's just that was my
No,
journey.
and I think that that's like I want to clarify that I wasn't trying to take that from you and rephrase that. What I was trying to do is sort of like think about maybe the listeners and how
Right.
they may hear it, right?
No.
For me, healing's messy, right? Healing is a very messy, often very ugly experience to go through. It
Yes.
ain't pretty, y'all. But for as awful as the healing experience can be, and often the healing process is worse than some of the trauma we experience, because you have to unpack it and relive it as an adult with all of your senses, all of your knowledge, all of everything that you
Right.
perhaps didn't have then. And but it's worth it when you start to see the other side and you start coming on the other side and you realize that I can see the light in the world again.
Mhm.
I can see the light in myself again,
Yeah.
and how I'm going to use that. So I think for me, like that's how you have chosen to frame your lived experience, is that this happens so that you can be utilized to help others.
Right.
And that's
Right.
what you're doing.
Right.
So I think, right? And I think at 74 years old, to be so open and to be so into what makes you happy, right? That's beautiful. I think you could teach a lot of other 74-year-old people that it's time to live their lives for them. And
No,
it's not about necessarily abandoning your spouse or your family or things like that, but like live in your authentic self.
you
That's why
never
we're
want to
here.
stop. You never want to stop exploring. I mean, and for me, I've been fortunate. Well, women in my family have lived very, very long, except for my sister. But the thing is, too, is inside, I feel like I'm 25. I mean, I taught university. I love being with the young kids. I related to them. They related to me. And so I think that's a lot of it. I'm still so curious about life. I'm still so curious about and explorations, and that it's, yeah. I mean, I think and because ageism does exist.
Oh yes, it does.
I mean, it really exists, but that's another thing that, because I like to talk to, in front of groups, and and one of my things I talk about is aging with passion to live. I mean, it's, that's what you want to, do, right? So, yeah, until I till I don't have breath in me, it's going to be, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get the person who's just going to keep on going and going and going and writing. And, I've got so many things I want to do yet. So
So I hope that that's many, many, many years more
I'll
to
take
live authentically and to write and produce more work. So you have written 8 books. Now, is are the 8 books under Karen or
Annie. No, so I actually have 6 under Annie Moon, and I've got 2 under Karen.
okay?
So um, Paradise is the one that I'm really trying to promote the most,
This is your
because
memoir.
that's one that tells my story. And I actually had a narrator. I had it made into an audiobook because I wanted to have a bigger audience for it. So anyone who listens to audiobooks, you can get that anywhere. But I'm most proud of that, even because every single word in that book was written with intention. I mean, I went through a lot of drafts, and every single word is thought out. So I'm proud of it, just not only the story, but I'm proud of it also just for the writing in it. It's been, and the reviews I've gotten are the people who have told me, then have reviewed it. They just find it very empowering. I've had straight men. I mean, I had a 56-year-old straight white guy. He goes, "I'm straight, I'm cis white guy," and he said, "I can't tell you," he said, "how empowering that book was." His wife had gotten it, and he read it, and he said he resonated with some of the stuff in it. He said, because it's really not, it's not really almost about the lesbian love in it. It's also about what happened.
So
So
that is the book. That's amazing. And that book is called Paradise.
yes,
I will link in the description the links, all the links for Karen. Follow and support. Buy the book. Is it available like paperback, ebook, hardcover?
so it's available on Amazon. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. But like when I was very fortunate, and the woman who narrated the book for me, her daughter had just come out to her, and she was so inspired by the book that she connected me with Dreamscape audiobooks. So that's why they distribute it. It could be found all over, and it's been nominated. I just found out it's been nominated for 3 different sites. The audiobook, the people told me that, for top LGBTQ literature. So
I
in
love
June
it.
it's going to come out. Yeah.
I love it. And so, like, I think this is just a prime example of when you live in your truth and you move through life in your truth, what you can achieve, right? And
Yes.
I love your story. You have been an absolute pleasure to speak with today. Thank you for
Yeah.
being on this show. To find out more, find the link in the description. Like I said, buy the book, check Karen out. And Karen, I wish you such great continued success. And you have for someone who's gone through so much, you have such this cheerful and joyous disposition.
Thank you.
It's in your face, it's in your eyes, your movement, all of that. And I think that that's just such a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Until next time, everybody, get out there and live your wildest dreams. And we'll talk again soon.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.